Jack Morrison hadn't smiled in 5 years, not a real smile anyway, the kind that reaches your eyes and makes you feel something deep in your chest. That part of him died on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when he got the phone call that changed everything. His wife Claire and their 7-year-old daughter Lily were gone. A truck ran a red light. They said it was instant. They said they didn't suffer. But Jack suffered enough for all 3 of them. Now he lived alone in a cabin so far up the mountain that most folks in Timber Ridge forgot he existed. That's exactly how he wanted it. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road that turned to mud in spring and ice in winter. Pine trees surrounded it like silent guards, and the nearest neighbor was old Pete, who lived 2 miles down the hill. Jack spent his days guiding tourists through the wilderness trails. He knew every inch of these mountains. He could track a deer through fresh snow, identify a bird by its call, and start a fire in the pouring rain. But he couldn't figure out how to keep himself alive in the ways that mattered. He ate when he remembered. Usually canned soup heated on the stove or bread that had gone stale 3 days ago. Sleep came in short bursts between nightmares. The cabin stayed clean because Claire had loved a tidy home, and keeping it that way was the only promise he could still keep to her. On a Thursday morning in late September, Jack's body finally gave up on him. He was 3 hours into a solo hike, checking trail conditions before a weekend tour group when his legs just stopped working. One moment he was walking. The next he was on his knees in the dirt, the world spinning around him. He made it back to his truck somehow, drove down the mountain with his hands shaking on the wheel. When he pulled into his driveway, old Pete was waiting on the porch with a concerned look that Jack had seen too many times before. "You look like death warmed over," Pete said, helping Jack inside. "When's the last time you ate a real meal?" Jack couldn't remember. Yesterday? 3 days ago? Time had a funny way of blurring together when you stopped caring about it. Pete made him sit down and brought him water. Then he did something Jack didn't expect. He got angry. "This has got to stop," Pete said, his voice rough. "Claire and Lily wouldn't want this. You're killing yourself slowly, and I'm tired of watching it happen." Jack wanted to argue, but he was too exhausted. His body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "You need help," Pete continued. "Someone to cook for you. Make sure you're eating right." "I'd do it myself, but my arthritis is acting up and I can barely manage my own meals these days." The idea of having someone in his space, in Claire's kitchen, touching her things, made Jack's stomach turn. But he also knew Pete was right. He was 42 years old and he'd just collapsed on a mountain trail. If that tour group had been with him, if someone had been depending on him, things could have gone very wrong. "I'll think about it," Jack muttered. "You'll do more than think about it," Pete said firmly. "I'm going to the general store tomorrow and putting up a notice. You need someone cooking for you 3 times a week minimum. That's not negotiable." Jack was too tired to fight. He nodded and Pete left, but not before making him promise to eat the sandwich he'd slapped together from what little Jack had in the fridge. The next week, Jack found himself sitting in his truck outside the Timber Ridge general store, staring at a slip of paper with a phone number on it. A woman named Elena Rodriguez had responded to Pete's notice. She was available, she needed the work, and she could start immediately. Jack had put off calling for 3 days. But this morning he'd woken up dizzy again and he knew he couldn't keep avoiding this. He called the number. A woman answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was soft but steady. "This is Elena." "I'm calling about the cooking position," Jack said, his voice rusty from not talking much. "Can you come by tomorrow to discuss details?" They arranged a time. 2 in the afternoon. Jack spent the next day cleaning the cabin even though it was already clean. He turned the picture frames on the mantel face down. He couldn't bear to see Claire and Lily's faces while a stranger walked through their home. Elena arrived exactly on time. Jack watched from the window as she parked her old sedan and stepped out. She was shorter than Claire had been, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a blue sweater, and she moved carefully, like someone who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. Jack opened the door before she could knock. "Jack Morrison," he said, not offering his hand. "Elena Rodriguez," she replied. She didn't seem bothered by his coldness. "Thank you for meeting with me." He led her to the kitchen. It was the heart of the cabin, with big windows that looked out over the mountains. Claire had spent hours here, humming while she cooked. Lily doing homework at the table. Jack pushed the memories away. I need someone to cook meals 3 times a week, he said, keeping his voice businesslike. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'll buy the groceries. You just need to prepare the food. Nothing fancy. Just real food, Elena nodded. She glanced around the kitchen, taking in the empty counters, the spotless stove that clearly hadn't been used much. What do you like to eat? She asked. Anything. I'm not picky. Any allergies or foods you can't have? No. And you'll be here while I cook, or? I'll be around, Jack said. I work from the shed out back sometimes. I guide hiking tours. Schedule varies. Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that caught him off guard. I lost my husband 8 months ago. Cancer. I understand wanting distance from people, but I also need this job, so I'll respect whatever boundaries you set. I'll cook, I'll clean up after myself, and I won't ask questions you don't want to answer. Jack looked at her properly for the first time. There was something in her eyes he recognized. That hollow look of someone going through the motions of living without really being alive. When can you start? He asked. Monday works for me. They discussed payment. Jack offered more than the job was probably worth, but he had money saved and nowhere to spend it. Elena accepted without haggling. As she was leaving, she paused at the door. I have a 15-year-old son, she said. Diego. He's struggling with his dad's death, acting out in school. If I seem distracted sometimes, that's why. Jack didn't know why she was telling him this. He didn't ask. He just nodded. After she left, he sat in the quiet cabin and wondered what he'd just agreed to. Having someone here 3 days a week would change everything. The silence he'd wrapped around himself like armor would crack, but maybe that was the point. Maybe Pete was right. Maybe it was time to stop slowly dying and start figuring out how to live again. Jack walked to the mantel and picked up one of the picture frames. Claire smiled out at him, Lily on her hip, both of them laughing at something he'd said while taking the photo. His chest ached with the familiar pain. I don't know if I can do this, he whispered to the photo, but I'm going to try. He set the frame back down, still face down. He wasn't ready yet. But maybe eventually he would be. Monday morning came too fast. Jack was up before dawn, anxious in a way he hadn't felt in years. He made coffee and waited. Elena arrived at 9, just like they'd agreed. She came in quietly, carrying a canvas bag with her cooking supplies. Good morning, she said. Morning, Jack replied. Kitchen's all yours. I'll be in the shed if you need anything. He escaped before she could respond. From his workshop, he could see the kitchen window. He watched her move around, getting familiar with where things were. She didn't change anything. Didn't try to make the space her own. She just worked. 2 hours later, she knocked on the shed door. Food's ready, she said. I made extra so you'll have leftovers for tomorrow. Jack came inside to find 3 containers on the counter. The cabin smelled like garlic and herbs and something else he couldn't identify. Something that made the place feel less empty. Thank you, he managed. Elena nodded and left. Just like that. No small talk. No trying to connect. Exactly what he'd wanted. So why did the cabin feel even lonelier after she was gone? The first few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt safe because it was predictable. Elena arrived on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings. She cooked. Jack hid in his workshop. She left. He ate alone. But small things started changing. On her 3rd visit, Elena brought fresh basil from the farmer's market. On her 5th visit, she hummed while she chopped vegetables. It was so quiet Jack almost didn't hear it from the shed, but it drifted through the open windows like a song he'd forgotten existed. He should have told her to stop. This was supposed to be simple. Food, nothing else. But something about that soft humming made the cabin feel less like a tomb. By the end of the first month, Jack noticed other small changes. A jar of wildflowers appeared on the kitchen windowsill. Nothing fancy, just black-eyed Susans and purple asters that grew wild on the mountain. Elena must have picked them on her way up the driveway. Jack stared at those flowers for a long time. Claire used to do the same thing. She'd bring the mountain into their home in small ways like that. He should have thrown them out. Instead, he left them there. The food Elena cooked was different than anything Jack had eaten in years. Real meals with flavor and care in every bite. Chicken with lemon and garlic. Beef stew that made the whole cabin smell like home. Fresh bread that was still warm when she left it on the counter. Jack found himself eating everything. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. His body started feeling stronger. The dizzy spells stopped. He could hike for hours without his legs shaking. One Wednesday morning, Jack did something different. Instead of disappearing to his shed, he stayed in the kitchen. He poured himself coffee and sat at the table with his laptop, pretending to answer emails. Elena noticed but didn't comment. She just worked around him, moving through the space with quiet efficiency. "Do you like cooking?" Jack asked suddenly. The words came out rougher than he intended. Elena paused in her chopping. "I do. My grandmother taught me. She always said food is how we show love when words aren't enough." Jack thought about that. He hadn't felt loved in a long time. Hadn't felt worthy of it either. "Your son," Jack said, surprising himself again. "Diego, how's he doing?" Elena's hands stilled completely. She set down the knife and turned to face him. "Some days are better than others," she said honestly. "He's angry. At the cancer. It got at me sometimes for not being able to fix it. He's skipping classes and I don't know how to reach him anymore." Jack recognized that kind of anger. He'd felt it himself. Still felt it on bad days. "The mountains help," Jack said quietly. "When I can't stand being in my own head, I go up high where everything else looks small. Changes your perspective." "Diego's never been much of an outdoors kid," Elena said. "He's all about his computer and video games." "Bring him up here sometime," Jack heard himself say. "I could take him on an easy trail. Show him around." Elena's eyes widened slightly. "You'd do that?" Jack shrugged, already regretting the offer but unable to take it back. "Yeah, if he wants." "Thank you," Elena said softly. "That's really kind." Jack didn't feel kind. He felt awkward and exposed. He grabbed his coffee and mumbled something about checking the shed, but something had shifted between them. A door had opened just a crack. The next week, Elena stayed later than usual. When Jack came in from the shed, she was still cleaning up the kitchen. "Sorry," she said. "I'm moving slower today." "Didn't sleep well. Everything okay?" Jack asked, then immediately felt stupid for asking. Of course, everything wasn't okay. She was a widow trying to raise an angry teenager alone. "Diego got suspended from school," Elena said, her voice tight. "Fighting. He won't tell me what it was about. Won't talk to me at all." She turned away quickly, but not before Jack saw the tears in her eyes. He stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do. Claire had been the one who knew how to comfort people. Jack had always been better with silence and solitude, but Elena looked so small and tired standing at his sink, and before he could overthink it, Jack pulled out a chair. "Sit," he said. "I'll make you coffee." Elena looked surprised but sat down. Jack made coffee the way he liked it, strong and black, but he added cream to hers because he'd noticed that's how she made her own cup when she arrived each morning. They sat in silence for a while. The kitchen window showed the mountains turning gold and red with autumn. A hawk circled overhead, riding the wind currents. "I had a daughter," Jack said suddenly. The words came from nowhere, or maybe from somewhere deep he'd kept locked away. "Lily, she was 7. Elena's cup stilled halfway to her lips. She was funny. Curious about everything. Wanted to be a wildlife photographer when she grew up. I taught her how to use my old camera." "What happened?" Elena asked gently. "Car accident. 5 years ago. My wife too, Claire." Jack stared into his coffee. "I was supposed to pick them up from Claire's sister's house, but I had work stuff. Told them to take a taxi. The driver ran a red light." The words hung in the air between them. Jack had never said it out loud before. Not the whole story. Not the part about how it should have been him driving. "I'm so sorry," Elena whispered. "Everyone's sorry," Jack said, not unkindly. "But sorry doesn't bring them back. Sorry doesn't change the fact that I chose work over my family that day." "It wasn't your fault," Elena said firmly. "You know that, right? The driver who ran the light, that was their choice. Not yours." Jack had heard those words before, from therapists and friends and Pete. But somehow hearing them from Elena, from someone who understood loss, they settled differently in his chest. "I blame myself for a long time too," Elena continued. "When my husband got sick, I kept thinking if I'd noticed the symptoms sooner, if I'd pushed him to see a doctor earlier, maybe they could have caught it in time." "Could they have?" Jack asked. "No," Elena said. "The doctors told me that over and over. By the time symptoms showed, it was already too late. But guilt doesn't care about logic." They sat together as the light changed outside. Not talking, just being. Two people carrying heavy things they couldn't put down, but maybe could learn to carry better. When Elena finally left that day, Jack did something he hadn't done in months. He went to the mantel and picked up one of the photo frames. He looked at Claire and Lily's faces for a long time. Then he set the frame upright so they were looking out at the room. Just one frame. But it was a start. The following Monday, Elena arrived with someone unexpected. A tall teenage boy with headphones around his neck and a defensive slouch stood beside her car. "This is Diego," Elena said nervously. "He's suspended for 3 days. I couldn't leave him home alone and my usual sitter wasn't available. I'm sorry, I know this wasn't part of our arrangement. If you want me to reschedule, it's fine," Jack interrupted. He looked at Diego, seeing the same angry hurt he'd seen in his own mirror for years. "You can hang out in the living room. There's books if you want. Wi-Fi password is written on the router." Diego mumbled something. That might have been thanks and slouched into the cabin. Elena mouthed thank you at Jack before heading to the kitchen. Jack meant to go to his shed like always, but instead he found himself walking into the living room where Diego sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone with that particular intensity teenagers use to avoid the world. "Your mom says you like computers," Jack said. Diego shrugged without looking up. "I've got an old camera you might find interesting. Digital. I used to do wildlife photography. Could show you some tricks if you want something to do besides stare at that screen." That got Diego's attention. He looked up, suspicious but curious. "What kind of camera?" "Canon. Got some good lenses too. I don't use it much anymore." "Why not?" Diego asked. Jack considered lying. Considered saying he got busy or lost interest. But something about this kid with his walls up and pain showing through the cracks made Jack choose truth. "Because my daughter used to be my photography buddy. After she died, it hurt too much to pick up the camera." Diego's expression shifted. The defensive mask slipped just for a second and Jack saw the scared kid underneath. "My dad died 8 months ago," Diego said quietly. "I know. Your mom told me. I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry," Diego echoed Jack's words from days before. "But it doesn't help." "No," Jack agreed. "It doesn't. What helps is finding ways to keep going, even when you don't want to." They looked at each other across the coffee table, two people at different points on the same painful road. "So you want to see the camera or not?" Jack asked. Diego nodded. Jack brought out his equipment and for the next hour he showed Diego the basics. How to adjust aperture and shutter speed, how to find the light. Diego asked good questions, smart questions, and slowly his defensive posture relaxed. When Elena finished cooking and came to find them, she stopped in the doorway. Jack and Diego were looking at photos on the camera's display screen, their heads bent together, and Diego was almost smiling. Her eyes met Jack's over her son's head, and the gratitude there made something warm unfold in Jack's chest. Something he thought had died with his family. That night, after Elena and Diego left, Jack sat on his porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. The cabin wasn't as quiet as it used to be. He could still hear Elena's humming in his memory. Could still see Diego's face lighting up when he captured a good shot of a bird on the feeder. For 5 years, Jack had been surviving. Just getting through each day. But today, for the first time, he'd felt something close to alive. The photo frame on the mantel caught the last rays of sunlight. Claire and Lily smiled out at the room, frozen in a moment of joy. "I think I'm going to be okay," Jack whispered to them. "It's going to take time, but I think maybe I'm finally ready to try." The mountains didn't answer, but the wind through the pines sounded almost like approval. The storm hit on a Friday afternoon in late October, coming down from the mountains with a fury nobody expected. Elena had arrived that morning under cloudy skies, but nothing suggested what was building up above the peaks. By noon, the wind was rattling the cabin windows. By 1 o'clock, rain hammered the roof like fists demanding entry. By 2, the power flickered and died. Jack came in from the shed soaked despite his rain jacket. Elena stood at the window, her phone pressed to her ear, worry etched across her face. "Still no signal," she said, lowering the phone. "I need to get home. Diego's alone." "You can't drive in this," Jack said firmly. "Road's already flooding at the bottom of the mountain. I saw it on my way back from checking the generator. But Diego is 15 and capable of handling a storm. You leaving now would just mean he'd be worried about you too." Elena bit her lip, looking torn. Jack understood. When you've lost someone you love, every separation feels dangerous. Every goodbye could be the last one. "The landline still works," Jack offered. "Old copper wires run underground. You can call him." Elena's shoulders sagged with relief. She used Jack's phone to call Diego, speaking rapid Spanish that Jack didn't understand but could feel the emotion behind. When she hung up, she looked calmer but still tense. He's okay. Scared but okay. My neighbor said she'd check on him. Good, Jack said. Looks like you're stuck here for the night. Storm's supposed to blow through by morning. Elena glanced around the cabin as if really seeing it for the first time. She'd been coming here for 2 months but always focused on the kitchen, never lingering in the personal spaces. I'm sorry to impose, she said. You're not imposing. It's just weather. Jack headed to the fireplace. I'll get a fire going. Might as well be comfortable. While Jack built the fire, Elena returned to the kitchen. Soon the smell of garlic and onions filled the cabin. She was improvising dinner from what was in the pantry, moving through the space with the confidence of someone who'd learned it well. They ate by candlelight at the kitchen table, the storm raging outside while warmth built inside. It should have been awkward, this forced intimacy, but somehow it wasn't. Tell me about Claire, Elena said quietly, halfway through the meal. Jack's fork paused. Nobody ever asked him to talk about Claire. They asked how he was doing, if he needed anything, but they avoided mentioning her name like it would break him. What do you want to know? He asked. What made you fall in love with her? Jack thought back to a lifetime ago. Her laugh. She had this huge laugh, totally uninhibited. The first time I heard it, I was giving a nature talk at the community center. Made some dumb joke about bears, and she just let loose with this laugh that filled the whole room. I knew right then I wanted to spend my life making her laugh like that. Elena smiled. Did you? Make her laugh, I mean. Yeah, Jack said, surprised by the warmth of the memory instead of just the pain. Yeah, I did. She thought my wilderness stories were hilarious. I'd come home and tell her about tourists who packed high heels for mountain hikes, or the guy who tried to take a selfie with a moose. She'd laugh until she cried. She sounds wonderful. She was. Jack took a breath. Tell me about your husband. What was his name? Raphael, Elena said softly. Rafa, we met in college. He was studying engineering, and I was in social work. He used to say we balanced each other. He built things and I fixed people. How long were you together? 17 years married, 20 total. We were high school sweethearts. Elena's eyes got distant. He was my whole world. When he got sick, watching him fade day by day, it was like losing him 1,000 times before the final time. Jack reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Just once, briefly, but Elena's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. You get it, she whispered. Most people are uncomfortable with grief. They want you to move on, to be okay, but you understand that some losses change you forever. They do, Jack agreed, but that doesn't mean we stop living. Took me a long time to figure that out. Still figuring it out, honestly. The power flickered back on, startling them both. The lamp in the corner blazed to life, harsh after the soft candlelight. But then the power died again, plunging them back into gentle darkness. Elena laughed, and Jack realized it was the first time he'd heard her really laugh. It reminded him a little of Claire's laugh, unguarded and real. The universe wants us to keep talking, she said. They moved to the living room after dinner, the fire crackling and the storm creating a strange cocoon around them. Elena noticed the single photo frame Jack had set up right on the mantel. Is that them? She asked. Claire and Lily? Jack nodded. Elena stood and walked to the mantel, looking at the photo with careful attention. Lily has your eyes, she said, and Claire's smile is exactly how you described it, huge and uninhibited. There's more photos, Jack found himself saying. I've been keeping them face down. Couldn't look at them for a long time. But maybe, would you like to see them? Elena turned to him with such understanding in her expression. Only if you want to share them. Jack got up and started turning the other frames upright. One by one, his family came back into view. Claire in her wedding dress. Lily as a baby. Family camping trips. Christmas mornings. A whole life captured in frozen moments. He sat back down and Elena sat beside him on the couch. She didn't say the usual things people say. No, they're beautiful or I'm so sorry. She just sat with him in the weight of his loss. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Elena asked after a while. Yeah. Sometimes I'm angry at Rafa for dying. I know it's not fair. He didn't choose cancer, but he left me here alone, trying to figure out how to be a single parent, how to pay bills on one income, how to help our son through his grief when I'm drowning in my own. And I'm so angry at him for that, and then I feel terrible for being angry. Jack turned to look at her. I'm angry at Claire sometimes, too. She was the strong one, the one who knew how to handle feelings in difficult conversations. I'm just a guy who's good with trees and mountains. How am I supposed to navigate this world without her? But you are, Elena said. You're doing it. Maybe not perfectly, but you're here. You're helping my son. You're letting me into your space. That takes strength. You're strong too, Jack said. Stronger than you think. Diego's lucky to have you. He doesn't think so. He told me last week he wishes it had been me instead of his dad. The pain in Elena's voice made Jack's chest ache. He doesn't mean it. He's just a kid trying to hurt something because he hurts so much himself. I know, but it still breaks my heart. They sat in silence for a long moment. The storm was starting to ease outside, the rain turning from aggressive to gentle. Jack? Elena said quietly. Yeah? Thank you for this. For not making me feel alone in the grief. For understanding. Thank you too, Jack said. For the same reasons. Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. It should have felt strange, this sudden closeness, but it felt natural. Two people who'd been walking through darkness separately, finding comfort in shared understanding. Jack didn't move away. He sat there with Elena's weight against him, watching the fire burn down to embers, and felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Peace. When Elena finally dozed off, her breathing evening out in sleep, Jack carefully shifted to make her more comfortable. He draped a blanket over her and built up the fire so she'd stay warm. Then he walked to the window and looked out at the clearing storm. The clouds were breaking up, revealing stars between the gaps. The mountain stood dark and solid against the night sky. Claire used to love storms. She'd pull him onto the porch to watch the lightning, fearless in the face of nature's power. After she died, Jack had hated storms. They reminded him too much of that rainy afternoon when everything ended. But tonight, with Elena sleeping peacefully on his couch and the storm passing overhead, Jack didn't hate it. The storm had brought unexpected connection, forced him to open up in ways he'd been avoiding, given him space to talk about Claire without falling apart. Maybe that was healing. Not forgetting the people you lost, but learning to carry their memory without being crushed by the weight of it. Jack pulled out his old camera, the one he'd shown Diego. He hadn't taken a photo in years, but something made him want to capture this moment. The dying fire, the storm-washed windows, Elena curled under a blanket on the couch. He didn't photograph Elena directly. That felt too invasive, but he captured the scene, the warmth of the cabin against the wild night, evidence that life continued even after loss. When he reviewed the photo on the camera's small screen, Jack saw something that surprised him. The image looked like hope, like a house that was slowly becoming a home again. He heard Elena stirring and quickly put the camera away. She sat up, disoriented for a moment. I fell asleep, she said, rubbing her eyes. I'm sorry, don't be. Storm's almost over. You should take the bedroom. I'll sleep out here. Jack, this is your house. Elena, Jack interrupted gently. Take the bedroom. I insist. She looked like she wanted to argue but was too tired. Okay, thank you. As she headed to the bedroom, she paused and turned back. Tonight meant a lot to me. Talking about Rafa, sharing the grief. I haven't felt this understood since he died. Me too, Jack admitted. Elena smiled. That warm smile that had been slowly bringing life back to his cabin and disappeared into the bedroom. Jack stretched out on the couch, staring up at the ceiling beams. His home no longer felt like a mausoleum. Elena's presence had changed something fundamental. Not erased Claire and Lily's memory, but made space for new connections alongside the old ones. He thought about what Elena had said earlier, that some losses change you forever. She was right. Jack would never be the man he was before the accident. That version of himself died with his family, but maybe he could be someone new. Someone who honored his past while still moving forward. Someone who could help a grieving widow and her angry son. Someone who could feel something again besides numb emptiness. The last of the storm rumbled away into the distance. Jack pulled the blanket up and closed his eyes. For the first time in 5 years, he felt like tomorrow might bring something besides just survival. Tomorrow might bring actual living. And that thought, instead of terrifying him, filled Jack with something dangerously close to hope. True to his word, Jack took Diego. Hiking the following weekend. Elena had been hesitant at first, worried her son would be rude or uncooperative. But Diego had surprised her by agreeing without much argument. Jack picked them up early Saturday morning. Diego climbed into the truck with his usual teenage slouch, but Jack noticed he'd brought the camera. "Thought you might want to practice what I showed you," Diego mumbled. "Good thinking," Jack said. "There's a spot up on Eagle Ridge where the light hits perfect in the morning. Great place for photos." They drove up the winding mountain road in comfortable silence. Jack had learned that Diego, like himself, didn't need constant conversation. Some people processed the world quietly, and that was okay. The trailhead was empty this early. Jack led Diego up a moderate path, pointing out animal tracks and interesting plants along the way. He didn't lecture or test, just shared information when it felt natural. Halfway up, Diego stopped to photograph a cluster of mushrooms growing on a fallen log. Jack watched as the boy adjusted settings, checked the light, moved around to find the right angle. The angry, defensive kid disappeared when he looked through the camera lens. "Your dad would be proud," Jack said quietly, "of how quickly you're learning this." Diego's hands tightened on the camera. "He never got to teach me anything. The cancer came so fast. One day he was fine, next day he couldn't get out of bed. By the time I realized I was losing him, it was too late to ask him stuff." Jack sat down on the fallen log. Diego hesitated, then sat beside him. "What would you have asked him?" Jack said. "Everything," Diego's voice cracked. "How to be a man. How to know if you really like someone. How to stop being so angry all the time. He had answers for everything, you know? And now he's just gone and I'm supposed to figure it all out alone." "You're not alone," Jack said. "You've got your mom. She doesn't get it. She's too busy trying to keep everything together. I can't add my problems to her pile." Jack recognized that burden. The weight of trying to protect people by hiding your pain. He'd been doing it for 5 years. "My daughter Lily was only 7 when she died," Jack said. "Sometimes I think about all the things I'll never get to teach her. How to drive, how to stand up to bullies, what to look for in a partner someday. All these conversations we'll never have." Diego looked at him with something like understanding. "But here's what I've learned," Jack continued. "Your dad taught you more than you realize. The way you care about your mom even when you're angry. The curiosity in your eyes when you're taking photos. The fact that you showed up today even though you didn't have to. That's all him. Parents shape us in ways we don't see until later." "I just wish I could talk to him one more time," Diego said, tears threatening. "Tell him I love him. That I'm sorry for all the times I was a jerk teenager." "He knew," Jack said with certainty. "Trust me. Parents know." They sat there for a while, two guys who'd lost people they loved, finding comfort in shared understanding. Then Diego raised his camera and took a photo of the view. The mountains stretched out forever, endless and solid and permanent. "Thanks for bringing me up here," Diego said. "Anytime, kid, anytime." When they got back to Elena's apartment in town that afternoon, she took one look at her son's face and pulled Jack aside. "What did you do?" she whispered. "He's different, calmer." "Just talked," Jack said. "Sometimes boys need a safe place to fall apart without worrying about taking care of anyone else." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means," but Jack did know, because helping Diego was helping him too, giving him purpose beyond just surviving, reminding him he still had something to offer the world. Over the next few weeks, Jack and Diego's hiking trips became regular. Every Saturday morning, weather permitting, Diego's photography improved dramatically, and his grades started climbing back up. The angry edge softened into something more manageable. Elena started coming to the cabin 4 days a week instead of 3. Not because Jack needed more meals, but because they both looked forward to the time together. They talked while she cooked. Really talked. About their lost partners, their fears, their hopes for the future. Jack found himself telling Elena things he'd never told anyone. How guilty he felt about working so much when Claire was alive. How he sometimes couldn't remember Lily's voice anymore and it terrified him. How he was scared to be happy again because happiness felt like betrayal. Elena shared her own fears. How some days she could barely get out of bed. How she felt like she was failing Diego. How dating seemed impossible because how could anyone understand what she'd been through? "You ever think about dating again?" Jack asked one afternoon. The question surprised him as much as it probably surprised Elena. She paused in her stirring. "Sometimes, but it feels wrong. Like I'd be replacing Rafa." "It wouldn't be replacing him," Jack said carefully. "It would just be living again. What about you?" Elena turned to look at him. Do you think about dating? Jack hadn't. Not really. Not until recently when he'd started noticing how the afternoon light caught Elena's hair, how her smile made something warm bloom in his chest, how much he looked forward to her presence in his space. I'm thinking about it, he admitted. Their eyes met across the kitchen. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or possibility. Before either could say more, Jack's phone rang. It was Pete asking for help with a fallen tree on his property. Jack went, but the moment stayed with him. The awareness that what he felt for Elena was shifting into something more than friendship. That evening, Jack got an unexpected visitor. A well-dressed woman in her 50s stood on his porch, her expression disapproving. Can I help you? Jack asked. I'm Patricia Rodriguez, Elena's mother-in-law. I need to speak with you about my daughter-in-law. Jack's guard went up immediately, but he invited her in. Patricia looked around the cabin with barely concealed disdain. Elena tells me you've been very kind to her and Diego, Patricia said. Her tone suggesting kindness was not what she suspected. I hired her to cook. We've become friends. Friends. Patricia's skepticism was clear. Mr. Morrison, Elena is a recent widow. My son has barely been gone a year. She's vulnerable right now, and frankly, working as someone's cook is beneath her dignity. Jack felt his temper rise. Elena is one of the strongest people I've ever met, and there's nothing undignified about honest work. She has a degree in social work. She should be using that, not playing housewife for a mountain hermit. The words stung, but Jack kept his voice level. What Elena does is her choice, not yours. My son loved her deeply, Patricia said, her voice breaking slightly. Seeing her move on so quickly, spending time with another man, it's like she's erasing him. And there it was. The real issue. Jack's anger faded into something like pity. She's not erasing him, Jack said gently. She talks about your son all the time. How much she loved him. How much she misses him. Moving forward isn't the same as forgetting. She should come back to the city, Patricia insisted, where her real family is, where we can support her properly. Does Diego want that? Jack asked. Patricia hesitated. Diego is a child. He doesn't know what's best for him. Diego is thriving here. His grades are up. He's found photography. He's processing his grief in healthy ways. You want to take him away from that? I want my family together, Patricia said, tears threatening now. I lost my son. I can't lose my grandson too. Jack understood then. Patricia wasn't really angry at Elena. She was drowning in her own grief and lashing out at any change that made her son's death more real. Loss is hard, Jack said quietly. I know. I lost my wife and daughter 5 years ago. But holding on too tight to the people left behind won't bring back the ones we lost. It just hurts everyone. Patricia left shortly after, but her words lingered like poison. That evening, when Elena came by to drop off some containers she'd forgotten, Jack told her about the visit. Elena's face went pale. She wants me to move back to the city. Is that what you want? No, Elena said firmly. This is the first place I've felt like I could breathe since Rafa died. Diego is doing better here. I'm doing better here. But Patricia is his grandmother. She has a right to be part of his life. She does, Jack agreed. But she doesn't have the right to control your life. Elena sank into a chair, looking exhausted. I feel guilty. For being happy sometimes. For laughing with you. For enjoying my days. Rafa's only been gone 10 months. Shouldn't I still be falling apart? Jack knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. Elena, listen to me. Grief doesn't have a timeline. And feeling joy doesn't mean you loved him less. It means you're surviving. He'd want that for you. Would Claire want this for you? Elena asked, her eyes searching his face. Us. Whatever this is becoming. Jack thought about his wife. Her huge, uninhibited laugh. Her generous heart. The way she'd always wanted him to be happy. Yeah, he said honestly. She would. Claire wasn't the jealous type. She'd want me to live, not just exist. And I think Rafa would want the same for you. Elena's tears spilled over. I'm so confused. I feel things for you, Jack, real things. But it seems too fast, too soon. What will people think? People will always think something, Jack said. The question is, what do you want? I don't know, Elena whispered. I know I'm happiest when I'm here. With you, but I'm scared. Scared of moving too fast. Scared of dishonoring Rafa's memory. Scared of dragging you into my complicated life. Jack wiped her tears with his thumb. My life's pretty complicated too. But maybe we're better at handling complicated together than apart. They sat there in the fading light, holding on to each other. Two broken people trying to figure out if broken pieces could fit together into something whole. When Elena left that night, Jack stood on his porch watching her taillights disappear down the mountain. The photo frames on his mantel glowed in the lamplight. Claire and Lily smiled out at the room. "I think I'm falling for her," Jack said to their images. "I didn't mean to. Didn't plan it. But she makes me want to be alive again. Is that okay?" The cabin was silent. But somehow in that silence Jack felt permission. Claire had loved him enough to want his happiness, even if that happiness came from someone else. The next morning, Jack woke up to a text from Elena. Just 3 words that made his heart race. "Let's try together." Jack smiled, really smiled for the first time in 5 years. The sun was rising over the mountains, painting everything gold. A new day, a new chance, a new beginning that honored the past while reaching for the future. He texted back. "Together sounds perfect. 6 months changed everything and nothing, all at once." The cabin on the mountain still stood in the same spot, surrounded by the same pine trees, but inside, life had returned in ways Jack never imagined possible. The kitchen played music now while Elena cooked. Not every day, but enough that silence no longer felt like the default setting. Diego spent most Saturday afternoons at the cabin, either hiking with Jack or working on his photography in the shed Jack had converted into a makeshift darkroom. The angry kid who'd first slouched through the door was gone, replaced by a young man who smiled more often than he frowned. Jack had started taking photos again, too. Not just teaching Diego, but rediscovering his own passion for capturing the world through a lens. He'd even sold a few prints to a gallery in town, something Claire had always encouraged him to do. Elena had launched a small catering business from her apartment, specializing in comfort food for community events. Word spread fast in Timber Ridge about the widow who could make a meal taste like coming home. She was booked solid most weeks, and Jack and Elena, they were taking it slow. Painfully slow sometimes. They hadn't kissed yet, though Jack thought about it more than he'd admit. They held hands sometimes while watching the sunset. Sat close on the couch during movie nights with Diego. But mostly they just existed together in comfortable companionship. It was Elena who finally pushed things forward. "Jack," she said one April evening after Diego had gone home, "I think we need to talk about what we're doing here." Jack's stomach dropped. Those words never led anywhere good. "Okay." Elena took his hand, which eased his worry slightly. "I care about you a lot, more than I expected to care about anyone again. But we've been dancing around this for months. I need to know what you want from this, from us." Jack had been asking himself the same question. What did he want? The safe answer was to keep things exactly as they were. Undefined, no pressure. No risk of loss, but safe wasn't living. It was just a prettier version of the isolation he'd built before Elena knocked on his door. "I want more," Jack said honestly. "I want to wake up and know I get to see you that day. I want to stop pretending you're just my friend when you're so much more than that. I want to build something real with you." Elena's eyes shimmered. "I want that too. But I'm scared, Jack. What if we mess this up? What if we're just two lonely people clinging to each other?" "We might be," Jack admitted. "But what if we're also two people who understand each other in ways nobody else can? What if the fact that we've both loved and lost makes us better at this, not worse?" "When did you get so wise?" Elena asked, smiling through tears. "Since I met a woman who refused to let me hide in my grief forever." Elena leaned forward and kissed him. Softly at first, tentative, then deeper as years of loneliness and longing poured into that single moment of connection. When they pulled apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. "That was nice," Jack said, understating drastically. "Just nice?" Elena teased. "Okay, it was perfect. Happy?" "Getting there," Elena said, tucking herself against his side. They sat on the porch as night fell over the mountains, and for the first time the future felt like something to move toward instead of something to fear. But life, as Jack had learned the hard way, rarely moves forward without complications. The complication arrived 2 weeks later in the form of Diego's grandmother, Patricia. But this time she didn't come alone. She brought her husband, George, and more surprisingly, she brought an apology. "I was wrong," Patricia said, sitting stiffly in Jack's living room, "about everything. about trying to control Elena's life, about judging her choices, about not seeing what was best for Diego. Elena looked stunned. Please let me finish, Patricia interrupted. I was so consumed by grief over losing my son that I couldn't see anyone else's pain, including my grandson's. George finally made me understand that pushing you away would mean losing Diego too. And I can't do that. George, a quiet man with kind eyes, nodded. We don't want to interfere. We just want to be part of Diego's life. And yours, Elena, if you'll let us. Elena's tears came fast. Of course, you're family. You'll always be family. Patricia turned to Jack. And you. I owe you an apology too. Diego talks about you constantly. How you've helped him. How you understand him. You've been the father figure he needed when I was too caught up in my own pain to see what he was going through. Jack didn't know what to say. He'd expected continued hostility, not gratitude. He's a good kid, Jack managed. Just needed someone to listen. He told me something last week, Patricia continued. He said his father would have liked you. That Rafa would be glad his mom found someone who treats her well. Coming from Diego, that's high praise. The words settled into Jack's chest, warm and healing. He'd worried constantly about replacing Diego's father in some way. Knowing he had Diego's blessing meant everything. After the Rodriguez family left, Jack and Elena stood on the porch watching the sun set. It had become their ritual. The mountains turning purple and gold, the day settling into quiet. That was unexpected, Elena said. Good unexpected, though, Jack replied. Very good. Elena squeezed his hand. I feel like we can finally move forward without guilt weighing us down. There's something I want to show you, Jack said. Wait here. He went inside and returned with a small box. Not a ring box, Elena noted with relief and maybe slight disappointment. They weren't ready for that. But a box nonetheless. I made something, Jack said, suddenly nervous. At the community center's woodworking class. I've been going on Thursdays. Diego's idea, actually. He said I needed hobbies beyond hiking. Elena opened the box to find a small wooden frame. Inside was a photo Jack had taken during the storm 6 months ago. The one of his cabin glowing warm against the wild night, but he'd modified it somehow, blending it with another image. Now the cabin showed 2 silhouettes in the window instead of one. It's us, Elena whispered. It's us, Jack confirmed. The night everything changed. When I first realized maybe I didn't have to be alone forever. Elena traced the frame with her finger. The wood was smooth, lovingly sanded and finished. This is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever made for me. I want you to have it, so you remember that storms can bring good things, that sometimes we find exactly what we need in the most unexpected places. They kissed again, longer this time. The sunset painted the world in colors that would have made perfect photos, but neither reached for a camera. Some moments were meant to be felt, not captured. The next few months unfolded with surprising ease. Jack and Elena made their relationship official, which in a small town like Timber Ridge meant everyone knew within a day. The gossip was mostly positive, though there were a few raised eyebrows about the speed. Jack didn't care. He'd wasted 5 years being alone. He wasn't wasting any more time. Elena moved into the cabin in July, bringing her things slowly. A bookshelf here, some photos there. The cabin that had been a shrine to the past gradually became a home for the present. Diego got his own room, decorated with his best photography prints on the walls. He split time between the cabin and his grandmother's house in town, finally having the extended family connection he needed. Jack started a wilderness therapy program, working with grieving kids and families. He partnered with Elena, who used her social work background to provide counseling. Together, they created a space where people could heal in nature, guided by 2 people who understood loss intimately. On a Saturday in late September, exactly 1 year after Elena first walked into Jack's kitchen, they held a celebration at the cabin. Not a wedding, though people asked constantly. Just a gathering of everyone who'd helped them heal. Pete came, of course. Patricia and George. Half the town showed up, bringing food and stories and laughter. Diego documented everything with his camera, his eye for composition now rivaling Jack's own. As the party wound down and the last guests trickled away, Jack found himself standing at the mantel. The photo frame stood proud, facing the room. Claire and Lily smiled out at the celebration, and beside their frames now stood one of Elena and Diego, and one of Rafa, looking healthy and happy. You okay? Elena asked, sliding her arm around his waist. Yeah, Jack said. I was just thinking. 5 years ago, I thought my life was over, that I'd never feel anything but pain again. And now look at this. He gestured around the cabin, music still playing softly, leftover food on the counter. Diego crashed on the couch, exhausted from photography, Elena warm and solid beside him. We made something good here, Elena said. Out of all that pain and loss. We made something beautiful. We did, Jack agreed. And Claire and Rafa, wherever they are, I think they'd approve. I know they would, Elena said with certainty. Because love isn't finite. It doesn't run out when someone dies. It just changes shape, expands to include new people while still honoring the old. Jack pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. When did you get so wise? Since I met a mountain man who taught me that healing looks like showing up day after day, even when it's hard. They stood together as darkness fell outside and warmth glowed inside. Two people who'd been shattered by loss, now pieced back together in a new pattern, not fixed exactly. The cracks would always be there, but stronger for having been broken and brave enough to try again. Diego stirred on the couch, mumbled something about needing to upload photos, and stumbled off to his room. Jack and Elena laughed quietly. He's going to be okay, Elena said. We all are, Jack replied. Later that night, after Elena had fallen asleep, Jack stood on the porch, one last time. The mountains stood eternal against the stars. The same mountains he'd hidden in 5 years ago, using their isolation as armor against feeling anything. Now he saw them differently. Not as a place to hide, but as a place to heal. Not as a fortress, but as a foundation. He thought about Lily and how she'd wanted to be a nature photographer. Diego was living that dream now, and Jack got to guide him. He thought about Claire and her huge laugh. Elena's laugh was different but equally beautiful. Not a replacement. An addition. The past didn't disappear. It lived alongside the present in a complicated dance of memory and hope. Jack's phone buzzed. A text from a parent whose child would be attending their grief therapy program next month. Another family trying to find their way through darkness. Jack and Elena would be there to light the path. He went back inside to where Elena slept in their bed. Their bed. The cabin was truly theirs now, holding space for two families, two histories, two futures braided together. Jack climbed into bed carefully, not wanting to wake her. But Elena stirred and curled into him instinctively. Love you, she mumbled, half asleep. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. Jack's heart swelled until it felt too big for his chest. Love you too, he whispered back. Elena smiled in her sleep, and Jack closed his eyes, finally at peace. The mountain man who'd hired a lonely widow to cook had found so much more than meals. He'd found purpose, family, hope, love, and most importantly, he'd found that his empty soul wasn't empty anymore. It was full of new memories being made, new connections being formed, new reasons to wake up each morning and choose living over just surviving. The cabin lights glowed through the night. Inside, 3 people who'd each lost so much had found something precious together. Not a perfect family, but a real one, built on understanding, patience, and the courage to love again even when love had hurt so deeply before. The mountains stood witness, solid and eternal, as another day ended and another began. And in that small cabin halfway up the slope, life continued. Messy and beautiful and complicated and worth it. Always worth it. The sun would rise tomorrow over those same mountains. Jack would wake up beside Elena. Diego would shuffle into the kitchen looking for breakfast. They'd go about their day with the casual intimacy of people who'd chosen each other. And somewhere in the spaces between those ordinary moments, healing would continue. Not because time healed all wounds, but because love gave you reasons to tend those wounds carefully, dress them gently, and keep moving forward despite the scars. Jack Morrison finally understood what Claire had tried to teach him all those years ago. Life was meant to be lived fully, loved deeply, and shared generously. Even the loneliest souls could be fed. Even the emptiest hearts could be filled. All it took was the courage to open your door when someone knocked, to let light into dark places, to believe that second chances weren't betrayals but gifts. The mountain man and the lonely widow had both learned that lesson. And in learning it, they'd saved each other in all the ways that mattered. Their story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time they were writing it together.